The clock on the bedside table ticked toward 11:30 p.m. in a rhythmic pulse that felt like a countdown. I sat in my darkened study, the only light coming from the 3-monitor setup that displayed real estate acquisitions across the Pacific Northwest and the volatile fluctuations of the European hospitality markets. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the mahogany desk. It was a notification from the billing department of the Obsidian, the most exclusive rooftop lounge in Seattle. The digital receipt was for $15,000. Attached to it was a forwarded message from my mother, Eleanor. "Just settle this, Isabella. It's a small price to pay for the embarrassment you caused us last week. Your father's partners were asking why you were dressed like a secretary. Honestly, try to show some class for once." A second later, my younger sister Bianca sent a heart emoji in the family group chat, followed by, "Thanks for the champagne, sis. Next time, try to actually show up so we don't have to explain why you're always working at that dusty bookstore." I didn't blink. I didn't feel the familiar sting of tears or the heat of a defensive retort. I simply stared at the numbers glowing on the screen like an accusation. To them, I was the quiet, mousy daughter who worked as an assistant librarian, a safe job for a girl they deemed too unremarkable for the family's high society lineage. They believed I lived in a cramped studio and survived on a modest salary that I dutifully handed over whenever their lifestyle outpaced my father's dwindling inheritance. They had no idea that the library was a hobby I used to maintain my privacy. They had no idea that these hands, which they mocked for being stained with ink and dust, had spent the last 7 years building a shadow empire of boutique hotels and luxury rentals spanning 3 continents. I wasn't their ATM. I was the reason they weren't already on the street. But silence has a way of being mistaken for permission. They thought my compliance was a permanent subscription to my soul. They were wrong. I turned away from the phone and opened my laptop. The screen's blue light reflected in my eyes, cold and clinical. I bypassed my public profiles and logged into the encrypted backend of my holding company, Vesper International. This was my true world, a world of retinal scans, 2-factor authentication, and cold, hard leverage. I scrolled past the multi-million-dollar properties in Aspen and the beachfront villas in Tulum until I reached a folder tucked away in a partition labeled Family Debt Consolidation. I clicked it open. It wasn't just a ledger, it was a graveyard of their mistakes. Inside were the records of my father's catastrophic losses in offshore gambling from 2018, which I had quietly covered by purchasing his debt from sharks who were ready to break his legs. There were the invoices for my mother's designer handbags that she couldn't afford, consolidated into a low-interest loan I managed personally. And then there was Bianca's penthouse lease, a $9,000 a month luxury unit owned by a shell company I controlled. For a decade, I had been the silent architect of their safety. I had been the net that caught them every time they leaped without looking. I had told myself it was love, but staring at that $15,000 bill, the truth finally surfaced. It wasn't love. It was the invisible chain of the survivor. When you grow up in a house where affection is a limited resource, you start to believe that love is a transaction. You convince yourself that if you just pay enough, if you endure enough, if you fix enough of their messes, eventually they will look at you and see a daughter instead of a utility. But the ransom has no ceiling. I realized tonight that I could buy them the moon, and they would complain that it was too bright. My compassion hadn't been a gift. It was a subscription they had overdrafted for years. And tonight, their subscription expired. I navigated to the automated payment systems for the family accounts. Housing allowance for Julian and Eleanor. Active. I didn't hesitate. This wasn't revenge, it was accounting. It was a market correction. I clicked cancel. The screen flashed. Are you sure? I clicked confirm. The status bar turned a stark, bloody red. Terminated. I did the same for the credit cards. Terminated. I did the same for Bianca's car lease. Terminated. One by one, I turned off the lights in their financial lives. In less than 3 minutes, I dismantled the safety net I had spent 6 years weaving. The final balance due on the master ledger flashed. $5.2 million. That was what they owed me, and that was what I was going to collect. I closed the laptop and looked toward the bedroom. Caleb was sleeping, his arm reaching out to the empty space where I should have been. He was the only one who knew the truth. He knew I wasn't a librarian. He knew that beneath the quiet cardigans, I was a shark. He had begged me for months to stop funding them, telling me they would never change. I hadn't listened then because I was still wearing the chain, but I wasn't wearing it anymore. I climbed into bed, feeling a cold, sharp clarity. My heart beat slow and steady. There was no guilt. They wanted a reaction. Tomorrow they were going to get a foreclosure. At 7 a.m., the sun hadn't even fully crested over the skyline when the assault began. My phone vibrated against the marble countertop. 17 missed calls. 42 texts. It was Eleanor. I answered, putting it on speaker as I poured my coffee. "You ungrateful, spiteful little brat!" Her voice screeched through the speaker. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Do you have any concept of the humiliation? The card was declined, Isabella. Declined. In front of the entire staff, in front of Bryce. We tried to put it on your father's platinum card and the machine literally laughed at us. The manager looked at us like we were criminals. Do you know what it feels like to have a waiter pity you?" I took a sip of my coffee. "Good morning, Mother. I assume the bill wasn't settled to your satisfaction. It sounds like a cash flow problem. Perhaps you should have checked your balance before ordering the $12,000 vintage." "Don't you dare lecture me on finance," she screamed. "You cut us off. I tried to use the emergency fund for the Uber home and it was gone. You stranded us. Bryce had to call his mother to Venmo him money for a cab. Bryce is an influencer, Isabella. He knows people. If this gets out, we are ruined. Fix this right now. Transfer the money and apologize to Bianca. She's been crying all night. You ruined her networking opportunity." I hung up. I didn't block her yet. I needed the data. I opened Instagram and saw Bianca's story. A black screen with tiny white text. "It's crazy how the people closest to you want to see you fail. Jealousy is a disease. Get well soon, sis." Toxic family. Rising above, the gaslighting was breathtaking. She had reframed my refusal to be robbed as an act of jealousy. Then came the voicemail from my father, Julian. His voice was thick and slurring. "Isabella, you listen to me. I know that husband of yours is in your ear. That substitute teacher, nobody. He's a leech, a parasite. He sees money in your account and wants it for himself. You fix this, or so help me God, I will remind you who made you." I looked at Caleb. He wasn't a substitute teacher. He was the founder of a learning platform valued at $900 million. He had bought my father's gambling debts anonymously 3 times just to keep my childhood home from being firebombed by bookies. He was the only reason they still had a roof over their heads, and they called him a leech. "They're not mad that they lost the money," Caleb said softly. "They're mad that they lost their power over you." He was right. For years, I was the resource, and they were the management. Resources don't have opinions. But I wasn't a resource anymore. I was the CEO of my own life. I stood up and smoothed down my blazer. "Are you ready?" Caleb asked. "No," I said, grabbing my keys. "I'm overdue." I drove past the public library. For 5 years, I let them believe I spent my days organizing the Dewey Decimal System. It made me unthreatening. I didn't stop there. I drove to the glass and steel skyscraper downtown. I pulled into the spot marked Reserved CEO. Taking the private elevator to the 42nd floor, I felt the shift. The apologetic daughter vanished. I was Isabella Vane, the majority shareholder of MV Holdings. The receptionist nodded. "Good morning, Ms. Vane. Elena is waiting for you in conference room B." Elena was a corporate shark who specialized in hostile takeovers. She didn't deal in feelings. She dealt in leverage. I walked in, and she had a stack of files arranged with military precision. "I saw the transaction logs," Elena said. You terminated the housing allowance. Aggressive. It wasn't aggressive enough, I said. They think I'm holding my breath until they apologize. I need them to understand the bank is closed permanently. Elena slid a document toward me. Then we send a notice of debt acceleration. It outlines every loan you purchased, every balance you consolidated. The terms were always soft, but the fine print allows the lender to demand full repayment of the $5.2 million principal at any time. If they fail to pay in 30 days, we move to asset seizure. The house, the cars, the wages, we take it all. Do it, I said. This is the nuclear option. Isabella, Elena warned. Once you send this, you aren't their daughter anymore. You are their creditor. I haven't been their daughter for a long time, I replied. I've just been their sponsor. My phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Your dad just threatened to come to my school and get me fired. He called me a broke loser corrupting his daughter. I stared at the message. They were attacking Caleb now. Caleb sent a second text. Take the gloves off, Isabella. Drop the veil. Let them see who we really are. I instructed Elena to send the package on company letterhead and redirect all correspondence to my office. Somewhere, my parents were already raging, but I was done managing their emotions. Then Elena paused. There's a liability, Isabella. A second mortgage from 3 years ago for $250,000. The cosigner's signature is yours, but you were in Tokyo that day. Your father forged your name to fund Bianca's success, Dubai trips, and a G-Wagon financed by fraud. This wasn't a civil matter anymore. It was bank fraud and identity theft. I didn't flinch. I told Elena to prepare the police report, but hold it. I needed an admission. I invited them to dinner at the Zenith Lounge. They arrived arrogant, convinced I was surrendering. They ordered extravagantly, assuming I would pay. When the check came, it didn't go to me. It went to Caleb. The waiter addressed him by name and asked him to review deed transfer documents. Caleb signed casually. The bill went to the house account. That was when it landed. We owned the building. We owned the restaurant. I slid a folder across the table, the notice of debt acceleration. They owed me $5.2 million in 30 days. Beneath it was the forged loan application. I told them plainly, I hadn't reported it yet. They would avoid prison, but they would lose everything else. Bianca's boyfriend left the table immediately. Status evaporates fast without money. 30 days later, they defaulted. I sent the eviction crew. Watching them move into a walk-up they once mocked, I understood their arrogance had always been rented. Without possessions, there was nothing underneath. We sold the house and donated every dollar of equity to a scholarship fund. I deleted the last folder tied to them and closed my laptop. For the first time, the prison door was unlocked. If you've ever had to buy your freedom from the people who should have given it freely, you're not alone. I'm listening. Where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Let's talk about it.